Hi everyone, Devin from Pragmatic Works here, and in today's video we're going to be looking at a special feature inside of Power Automate to show how we can populate a Word template. And so my goal here is I want to be able to automate the populating of, say, something like a certificate of completion. So what I have on my screen right here is actually a legitimate certificate of completion that you might receive if you were to attend a Pragmatic Works class. And what I'd like to do is I want to automate it so that whenever someone requests a certificate of completion, that I can just simply have them fill out a form. It populates in information like their name, their class they attended, the date that they attended it, and all of that information will automatically be populated into Teams, I shouldn't say into Teams, but into a PDF that is then later emailed to them. So how do we get started with something like this? If we want to make a template out of a Word document, let's start back at Word. So inside of Microsoft Word, if you want to make this something that can be used inside of Power Automate, you first need to start by turning on the developer features inside of Microsoft Word. So the way this would work is I would go up to the File menu in the top left, way up here. And in the File menu, we're going to go down all the way to the bottom, down to Options. And when we select Options, that's going to pop open an area where we can turn on various features inside of Power Automate, including where we have the ability to customize the ribbon. So you'll see there's a Customize Ribbon section right here that if we select it, we will have the ability to turn on other features inside of Microsoft Word. And the one specifically that we're interested in for this example is the developer features. So if we turn on the developer features and hit OK, that will now add a new ribbon up on the top of our screen where we can set up placeholders where we can pass in values from Power Automate. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to do this by going up to the very top here and select the developer ribbon. I'm then going to highlight a portion of the text inside of my Word document. Let's say right here where it says first name. I'll highlight that text and then go up to the top underneath the control section, and we are specifically looking for this button right here. That is the plain text control, where we can actually make a placeholder that can then be replaced with something for Power Automate. So under the control section, we're going to select the plain text content control. Do not use the rich text one. The rich text one will not work with Power Automate. So stick with the plain text one. So we're going to select plain text. And you'll see it creates this placeholder for our first name of our attendee to our class. And so once we create that placeholder, we also need to name that placeholder. So that way, whenever we get to see this in Power Automate, we know which one's the first name placeholder, which one's the last name placeholder, which one's the class name, and which one's the date. And you can name these by selecting it, like we have right now, and then going up to the Properties menu up on the very top. So underneath Properties is where you can actually specify what is the name of this tag, what is the title of this placeholder to be. So we're going to go ahead and select Properties. And we're going to change the title here to first name. And we're going to make the tag also first name as well. All right, so once you've typed that in, you can hit OK. And that's now going to name this placeholder that we've created. Now we're going to do the same thing again over here where we find last name. So I'm going to go ahead and select last name, go back up to the control section, again found right here. And we're going to make a plain text control selection right here. And that's going to, again, select another element inside of our report that we want to be a placeholder. So with that selected, we'll then go back up to Properties, and we're going to name this, just like we did last time. We're going to call this last name. We're going to call the tag last name as well, and then click OK. Now we're going to do this a couple more times. We're going to do this another time here down where we have class name. So I'll, again, make a plain text placeholder. And we'll go ahead and change the properties to call this class name. I'm doing this a little bit faster because we've done it a few times now. But I'm going to go ahead and select and call this one class name and hit OK. And then I'm going to finally go ahead and select the date here as well. So for the date, we're going to make this into a parameter, into a placeholder, just like we did the previous two times. I'll select it, go over to Properties, and then we'll call this class date. How about that? All right, so with that done, I can hit OK here. We have this Word document prepared to actually use now. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to save the Word document, save it as a template. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save here first. And then I'm going to upload it to OneDrive so that way I can access it inside of Power Automate. So I'm going to go ahead and close the actual file here now. We're done doing the template portion. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add in to my OneDrive folder that I have right here, just called YouTube Certificate. And I'm going to drag and drop in the file that we just created. So I'm going to simply bring that into OneDrive so that way I can find it and use it later. You can see I've done this example before. I recreated it for our recording. And you can see now I have my YouTube Certificate template ready to go. Now, with it stored here, I need to figure out what is going to initiate or what is going to start the execution of my flow. Basically, what's my trigger going to be? What is going to start the flow? And for me, it's going to be a form, a Microsoft form. And let me bring this over so you can see this as well. This is a form that I pre-created in Microsoft Forms. You can create these for free. And within inside of Forms, I have a basic little form here where they will type in, "Thank you for attending the Power Automate workshop. Download your certificate now. Congratulations on completing the workshop." And fill out the form, which has a date, their first name, last name, and email address so I can actually email them the final product at the end. But this is going to give me the ability to email my users or my attendees a certificate that's populated, and I don't have to have any manual effort into it. All they have to do is fill out this form, and then we're good to go from there. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back into, or we're going to start by going into Power Automate. So I'm going to go launch powerautomate.com. And once I launch powerautomate.com, I'm going to create a new flow. Now, you could create these flows with inside of a solution if you wanted to. I'm going to keep things very simple and just go ahead and select create on the left-hand navigation. So I'm going to go ahead and select create over here. When I select create, it's going to give me the option to choose what type of flow do I want to create. Is it an instant flow? Is it an automated flow, scheduled, desktop, or business process flow? We're going to select the automated cloud flow for this one. And we're going to select and use the trigger here called when a new response is submitted. So basically, when someone submits a new entry into my Microsoft form, that's when the Power Automate flow should run. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select when a new response is submitted, and we will give this flow a name. So we'll call this something like YouTube Certificate, and then hit create. We'll keep it very, very simple. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to specify the form ID from Microsoft Forms that we want to pull information in from. And if we scroll through and look through all of the entries for forms that we have available, I have a ton of them here, but unfortunately, the one that we're using for this example is not listed. Now, the reason why it's not listed is because we have this form that's part of a grouping of forms. So say, for example, you're using Microsoft Teams. Every Microsoft team that you create also has the ability to group together forms. And when you group together forms within inside of a group, those forms oftentimes do not show up on the list here. But it doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means you have to be a little bit more creative with how you select your form. So here's how we would select a form if it's not listed. We would select the down arrow, go down to the very bottom, and select Enter Custom Value. And by selecting Enter Custom Value, we can pass in the form ID manually, just by pasting in the form ID, which we can gather by looking at the form itself. So if I were to go back over to our form up in the top here, I can find my form ID by simply looking at the URL up at the top. So when you look at the URL, you'll find there's a section here that has the form ID. And if I simply copy everything after the equal sign here, that is the form ID that we would want to recognize. So whenever somebody fills out this form, it will kick off our flow. All right, so we're going to go ahead and select that form ID like so, and we're going to bring that over to Power Automate. So I just copied that portion of the URL. I'll now bring that back over into Power Automate and paste in the URL right here. All right, looking good. So now we're going to add another step. So that's simply going to kick off the flow. That's going to determine when the flow starts. Now the next step is we need to gather the information from that response. So what information did the user actually type in when the flow was initiated? So to do that, we're going to select New Step right here, New Action. And we're going to add in another Microsoft Form action. So we can type in Microsoft Forms here if we wanted to. And the one that we're interested in is the one called Get Response Details. So what this is going to do is it's going to bring back what the users actually typed in whenever they filled out the form. The trigger by itself does not do that. The trigger just initiates the flow, but we're not getting any of the details of what they typed in. So by using the Get Response Details action, this will return back what the users actually typed in whenever they submitted the form. So just like we did last time, when we hit the drop down for the form ID, we won't see the form ID that we created. As much as you want to look, you won't find it, at least in my scenario. You may find yours, depending on how you created the form. But I can still enter in a custom value here and paste in the portion of the URL that we copied earlier. The other thing that we're going to need to identify, and let me take myself off camera here for a little bit while we go to this next part. The other thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to specify inside the response ID property, we're going to specify that we want to pull back the response ID for our trigger. That's what we're seeing right here. We want to get the response ID and send it into our get response details action that we have right after our trigger. So this is basically pulling and saying, all right, whoever filled out this form that initiated the flow, let's get just their information. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pass in response ID from the dynamic content section into our action for get response details. All right, looking good. Let's go ahead and save just to make sure we are saving early and often is always a good practice here. But now that we've done that, our next step is going to be to actually populate a Word template. So that's another type of action that you have available inside of Power Automate. And we can select that by, again, going down to the bottom here and adding another new step in. So we'll select New Step. And the new step that we want to use is that we want to populate a Word template. That's actually the name of the step here. So if you search for populate a Microsoft Word template, you should find it pretty quickly. Let's see, I say that, but let's see. Here it is, Word Online. And we're going to populate a Microsoft Word template right here. So we'll go ahead and select populate a Microsoft Word template, and we're going to have to tell Power Automate where our Word template is stored. Remember, we stored it in OneDrive at the very beginning of this demo. So if I wanted to actually select that, I can hit the location, and I can go search for which location it is that we want to use to find our Word template. Now, we're going to be using OneDrive for Business in this scenario, so I'll go ahead and select OneDrive for Business. And then underneath the document library section, I can select that I want to use OneDrive. Now you'll notice I have several OneDrive connectors that are visible here. The one that we're going to be using in this example, for me at least, is the very last one. These are just other OneDrive connectors that I made over time to different OneDrives. So I'm going to go ahead and select OneDrive, and then I will select the file from that OneDrive that has my template. So if I go navigate over here on the right-hand side, I can navigate. Let me take myself off the screen for a moment again. I can navigate and find the full file folder that has in it my Word template. So I'm going to scroll down, find my Word template right here, YouTube certification, and I can find my Word document here that's the template for what we're trying to do. So I'm going to go ahead and select that template. It does need to be a docx file. So you don't need to make it a Word template file. You're going to simply use the traditional Word document file type. All right, so we're going to go ahead and select that. And that's now going to collect our template information. And you'll notice after a few moments that we get some properties that are made available to us here, like the first name, last name, class name, and the class date. So these are properties that we can now pass in to our Word template. So for our first name, for example, we're going to collect our first name from our Microsoft Forms dynamic content. So when we select our first property here for first name, you'll be able to see over on the right-hand side, there is dynamic content for the first name, which is being captured from the get response details action just above. And I can go ahead and select that or double click on it, and it will add it into my first name action here. All right, so if I go ahead and select first name, there you go. You can see the dynamic content gets plugged into my first name property. And I'm then going to go ahead and select the last name from the dynamic content as well. For the class name, we may want to consider creating something like a variable above this, so that way we can very easily reuse the class name. We'll do that here in a moment. And then for the class date, we can go ahead and plug in the date of the course inside of the class date property. Now, I mentioned it might be helpful to have a variable to store the actual class name. I can do that by going up to the top here and adding another step. And I'm going to add in a initialize variable step, which you can find right here. So I'm going to initialize a variable so that way we can create a variable. And again, this variable is solely going to be used to store whatever the name of the class is that the certificate is for. So that way we can reuse the name over and over. So variables make life a lot easier when you're going to reuse those same values over and over. So I don't have to hard code it each time. So I'm going to go ahead and call this variable var, and we're going to make this a string. So we'll call it var str for string, and we'll call it class name. And I can go ahead and type in a value here and call this our Power Automate workshop. Now, with that variable created, I can pass that variable value into the property that we have right here using the dynamic content section. So again, this is capturing it from our variable. You see the variable right here, and we're going to plug it into the class name property using the dynamic content. All right, so let's go ahead and select that. That's filled in our entire Word template now. And so the next thing that we can do, of course, is we can save. Make sure you save often. But the next thing that we can do is we want to actually create the Word file. And we're going to create the file and then use the file and convert it to a PDF. And then we're going to send it to ourselves. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add in another new step here. So I'll add a new step. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a file using OneDrive. Now, I think there is a another Word action that can create this PDF a little bit faster, but I kind of want to show you some other things we can do here. So I'm going to go ahead and select that we want to create a file. The folder that the file is going to be created in is a folder that we're going to point to. We'll point to the, let's say we point to the same folder we had earlier. Let's go back into my OneDrive folder, and I'm going to go all the way down to my YouTube certification folder, and we'll go ahead and select that. So that's where it's going to create our folder. And then we can kind of build out a string for the file name. So maybe I want the file name that's created to have the name of the class in the beginning. So we'll do that with our variable. And then I'll say, hey, I want to go ahead and put the student's first name as part of the file name that's created. So we'll say their first space last name. And then we'll go ahead and plug in the file extension at the end, which should be .docx as a Word document file. Then the final thing we'll do is we're going to pass into where it says file content. We're going to pick up the dynamic content from our populate a Word template, which you can find right here. And we're going to go ahead and plug that into our file content that's going to create this new file for us. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. Oop, put it in the wrong place. We want it right there. There we go. And now we can do some other things. So right now it's going to create this as a Word document, but maybe I want this to be a PDF. So I can convert this Word doc to a PDF if I wanted to. And then I can send an email. A lot of things we can do here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to say we want to convert the file. And the file that we're going to use, the action we're going to use is the OneDrive for Business convert file preview. And we're going to say that the file that we want to convert is actually going to be picked up from the previous action. Again, we're using a lot of dynamic content here where we're going to say take the file we created here using the ID column and pass that into where it says file here. All right, so we can use dynamic content and just pass in the file from one action to another action. And again, ultimately what we're trying to do in this one is we're trying to convert this to a PDF. Ooh, let me circle that a little better. There you go. All right, so that's going to make this file into a PDF. Now we want to send it to our users. So we're going to go ahead and add in another new step here. And we're going to send an email. And so we're going to select the send an email action. And we're going to determine who do we want to send it to. Well, we want to send this to the person that filled out the form. So we should be able to find some dynamic content again that's going to pull from our form their email address. Remember, we had them fill out their email address in the form, so now I'm going to use that and pass in the dynamic content into this action to send them an email right back. So they fill out the form, I send them an email back. All right, so we're going to go ahead and select that we want to pass in the email address into the to line. For the subject, we might say something like your variable, your Power Automate Workshop certification or certificate is now available. All right. Then we can come down to the bottom here and we can say hi, and let's capture their name. Remember, we already have their first name, so we can say hi, Devin. We'll pretend it's me. Hi, Devin. Thank you for attending the, let's get our dynamic content for our variable. Let's say that says Power Automate Workshop. So you can kind of say what the value should be, and that'll help you here a little bit. But thank you for attending the Power Automate Workshop. We hope you enjoyed the class. Please find your attached certificate of completion. All right. So now what we can do is we can actually come down to the advanced section of this, and we can determine who is it going to be sent from. So if I want to make it always sent from me, I can do that. So I can actually type in myself here. Or if you have the ability to send as another user, you can type them in as well. And then down in the attachment section, we're going to add in the dynamic content from when we converted the file right here. We're going to grab the file name and plug that into where it says attachment name. And we're going to grab the file content and plug that in where it says attachments content. So you can see here what we're about to do. We're going to go ahead and select the attachments file name and the attachment's file content and plug those different variable values in. All right, looking pretty good. You can change the importance of the email if you wanted to make it high importance. That's up to you. But we're going to go ahead and leave this as is. I think this is looking good. And now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap things up. We're going to tidy things up a little bit because the last piece that we're missing right now is we do create this Word document right here, but I want to, at the end, delete that Word document. I don't need to keep the Word doc after we create it. I only needed that temporarily. So if I want to go back and delete that Word document later, we can do that by adding in an action. And we can call this delete file. All right, so it's going to be a OneDrive action here. We'll select delete file. And then we're going to pass in, again, the ID for that file. I'll take myself off camera here for a moment. You can see right here where it says create file. That is the variable, that is the path or the file name that we can use here. Rather than having to go navigate to the file location, we want to make this dynamic, and so we can just reuse the file ID that we captured before. So if I go ahead and select ID, that will finally wrap things up, tidy things up, and delete the file at the end here. All right, this is looking good. So let's go ahead and save our work. And now that we've got this hopefully fine-tuned here at least a little bit, what I would normally do is I would go back through and rename all these actions. So that way, if I come back to look at this later, I'll know what everything was doing. But for the purposes of what we're doing today, I think this is just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and test our flow. And I'm going to fill out the form. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out my form right here. My flow is in test mode right now. It's waiting for me to submit a value. But I'm going to say what the date of the class was. I'll say my first name, last name, and email address. And when I fill this out and go ahead and hit submit, this is going to execute my flow. Boom, there goes my flow right away. And I should get an email sent to me in just a matter of seconds. Less than a minute this flow will run, really less than 30 seconds this flow will run. It will send me that certificate of completion. I can go check my inbox and I can see what it produced. So let's see, let me wait a few more moments here and we'll take a peek at what it created for us. Now this is just part one of a couple videos that we're going to do where we're going to show how we can not only do the certificate of completion, but maybe we want to add in some other capabilities as well. We're going to follow this video up with some more. So if you like this video, make sure you subscribe. Hit that notification bell as well to make sure you're getting notified whenever we have new videos, because we're going to add some more to this if you really like this one. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. All right, so here is our final product. It sent me an email. It said, your Power Automate Workshop certificate is now available. Thank you for attending the Power Automate Workshop. We hope you enjoyed the class, blah, blah, blah. And then if we open up the certificate of completion here, check this out. Look at this. It's got plugged in my name. It's got plugged in the name of the workshop. It's got the date plugged in. We could do some date formatting on here. So if we don't like the way that the date's organized, you can put the month, day, year if you wanted to. That's some simple expressions to do. But here we were able to create this automated process for creating certificate of completions that not only are created, but they're then sent to our users. So that is our example for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this and got a lot out of it. Again, don't forget to subscribe for when I start to take this to the next level. What we're going to do next is show how you can embed in your email the ability for your users to share on LinkedIn about their success. I want my users to be able to tell everyone, hey, I completed this class with Pragmatic Works or whatever your company name is. How can I get that on LinkedIn? We're going to take a peek at that in one of our future videos. Hope you enjoyed this one for today. Happy power automating and take care. Thanks.